Yogah Karmasu Kaushalam.
Of this online refresher course in social sciences organized by UGC HRDC Gujarat University. First of all, I would like to thank Director of this center and course coordinators for involving me in this refresher course. I'm here to make a presentation on a very contemporary topic which runs across different disciplines of social sciences and also humanities. I would like to share a PowerPoint for you for your convenience. The topic which I'm going to deal here is social exclusion concept and its context. Now let's look at the available literature which deals with various dimensions of social exclusion. But before that, I would like you to have a look at the word which is social exclusion. Now, this word social exclusion was in use in terms of research and teaching from the beginning, from the 1950s, 60s, 70s, and onward. We see the use of this term exclusion. I would like to give an example over here. The discipline of sociology has used this word in describing the rural social structure for making us understand about the caste system, agrarian class structure, family and kinship, and so on. Likewise, the term social exclusion and the allied terms like deprived sections, weaker sections, inequality, and so on are seen in the writing and speeches of eminent personality, intellectual people, and social reformer. Also, the reflection of this word and the allied words are also seen in the Bhakti literature, who talk about social stratification, social inequality, and a divine call for the human rights. But we need to look at this issue in a very academic way. Now, we shall briefly look at some of the available studies dealing with various dimensions of social exclusion. As I told you, we have content of this word exclusion and also social exclusion in our past. The study of social exclusion, though it is of very recent origin, or we can say it has got evolved in last 4 decades. Now, how this term came into existence? This term came into existence in the studies of poverty and marginalized sections or marginalized people of the world. Now, what does social exclusion means over here? Social exclusion implies the exclusion of individuals, groups, or communities for participating in certain functioning and activities of society. So it is very clear over here that the exclusion is from participating in the society for an individual or a group or a community. Now, who was the person who was looking at the concept very closely? René Lenoir was the researcher who coined this term social exclusion while doing studies on poverty. When a critical analysis of the study on poverty was done, in the analysis, this term social exclusion came into existence. And there were further studies carried out from that point of time. That means in the later half of the 21st century. Lenoir has identified different excluded groups. Now, what are the groups according to him? He said, people who happen to be mentally and physically handicapped are excluded. Suicidal people, people with suicidal tendency, aged invalids, or aged persons unable to effectively perform any reproductive role, abused children, abusers, delinquents, single parents, multi problem household, marginals, asocial persons, and other social misfits in France. Now, when we look at the categories which Lenore has taken into consideration, this means that how this society was looking at the concept of inclusion or inclusive measures also. Now, going further, I would like to mention here Henry Silver, who has identified certain spheres of social exclusion for people. Now, he is talking about the sphere of earning their livelihood or secure permanent employment, holding property, or having credit, landholders, possessing housing, having minimal or prevailing consumption levels, acquiring education, skills, cultural capital, and so on and so forth. So, according to different social sciences, we can add many more spheres over here to make the approach for social exclusion studies very holistic. But here, Henry Silver has identified these many spheres in which the exclusion can tentatively happen. Now, going further and looking at the definition or a very acceptable definition, we consider Arjan Dehan's definition to be one of that. He is saying exclusion means the denial of equal opportunities imposed by certain groups of society upon other, which leads to their inability to participate in the basic social, cultural, civil, political, economic functioning of the society. Now, Han is saying that there has to be a individual or group who will be denying equal opportunity to other individual or group, which will lead to some kind of inability in one or multiple sphere in the society. By multiple sphere or many sphere, I mean to say that the societal spheres or processes are intertwined with each other, which makes a social fabric. Going beyond, after 3 decades of this term in 2004, Professor Amartya Sen made a very important landmark contribution to the field of social exclusion, where he says that there are different types and different contexts of understanding social exclusion. In terms, we can see that there is active exclusion, there is also passive exclusion. There is unfavorable exclusion and there is unfavorable inclusion also. He goes beyond and clarifies social exclusion by distinguishing the constitutive relevance of exclusion from that of instrumental importance. Now, to make us more understand about this concept, I would like to uh, go into a little bit detail and make you understand about what these are. When, for example, migrants or refugees are not given a usable political status, it is an active exclusion. And this applies to many of the deprivations from which minority communities suffer, like in our country itself, or in the Asian continents, or in European continents, or anywhere, we can see the situation of immigrants or refugees for whom the political status for getting any kind of welfare measures or identity is very difficult, and that directly means active exclusion. Further, when, however, the deprivation comes about through social processes in which there is no deliberate attempt to exclude the exclusion can be seen as a passive one. Now, giving an example over here, poverty and isolation generated by sluggish economy creates a poverty. Both these active and passive exclusion may be important, but they are not same in their ways. So active exclusion has a very direct connotation and passive exclusion has an indirect connotation over here. Further talking about what is unfavorable inclusion here, Professor Sain means that, for example, it means exploitative conditions of employment or of deeply unequal terms of social participation. The immediate focus is not on exclusion at all, but on the unfavorable nature of the inclusion involved therein. What is further unfavorable exclusion according to him? Here he talks about the identity of the individual or the group. The person's deprivation can have diverse form of origin and may lead also desperate forms and which creates unfavorable inclusion as well as prohibiting exclusion. So these are the four things which Professor Amartya Sen talks about or contributes to this field to make this field very much compatible with other disciplines of social sciences. He also spoke about constitutive relevance of the social exclusion. Being excluded can sometimes be in itself a deprivation, and this can be of intrinsic importance on its own. For example, not being able to relate to others and to take part in the life of the community can directly impoverish a person's life. It is a loss on its own, in addition to whatever further deprivation it may indirectly generate. This is a case of constitutive relevance of social exclusion. But not to have access to credit market, for example, through casual linkages leads to other deprivations such as income poverty or inability to take up interesting opportunities and might have been both fulfilling and enriching, but which may require an initial investment and use of credit. Casually, significant exclusions of this kind can have a great instrumental importance. So this is the kind of an example which talks about instrumental importance. Further, we can have more clarification about that. They may not be impoverishing in themselves, but they can lead to impoverishment of human life through their casual consequences such as denial of social and economic opportunity that would be helpful for the persons involved. So these were the kind of distinctions which Professor Amartya Sen gave us to understand what exactly these concepts are meaning in different contexts. Further, Gore and Figado explain about social exclusion, saying that it is not only participating in the functioning of the society, but according to them, it is the loss of rights associated with work and with the life, long-term unemployment and breakdown of social ties and disaffiliation. So as I told you that the term was coined from the discipline of economics, but when we look at the nature of definition which is given by different scholars, let it be Gore and Figado, here the terms are also indicating the contribution of different streams of social sciences like political science, sociology, gender studies, and so on and so forth. In other words, we can say that social exclusion takes away forcefully rights of the excluded people at various levels. which results into lack of their knowledge and participate in various activity. This is obviously very true. When the rights are taken away of the people who are at the margin very forcefully, who don't have the power to retaliate, they won't be having what are the knowledge, what are the processes which are happening in the society and how to participate in their activities. However, when we see that this term was coined like 4 decades ago in the industrialized society of the West, now the question is how it can be applicable in the developing society. It may not be the same for many of the developing society. For that reason, it is unquestionable whether the same unqualifiedly be applied in developing societies as well. In this regard, Atkinson's clarifies that in the industrial society, the concept of social exclusion is related to welfare state where the formal employment is quite advanced technologically. So Atkinson is taken into account the role of state institution, rather welfare institutions in the studies of social exclusion and inclusion. But when we look at the other end, but when we look at the issues of developing society, the concept is related not only to the issue of unemployment or technological advancement or only the state which has to take into action, but the concept here is related with basic capabilities, risk aversions, vulnerability, and sustainable livelihood. So these are the things which developing societies are having in their society, which needs to be looked very closely. Atkinson further says that people are considered excluded in such society not just because they do not have current job or income, but because they have very few prospects for the future. Now, it is not related only with the job or income over here, but the kind of creation which they are going to have in future in the form of problem that is also taken into account by Atkinson, who says that very few prospectors are left in the hand of the excluded people for their future life cycle. Thus, it is clear that one cannot look at exclusion or social exclusion of certain individuals or groups in isolation, but in their circumstances in relation to rest of the people in a society in which they live. So now here the context is being made that the exclusion phenomena has to be looked into the society in which people are residing. It has to be looked in connection with the society and the individual and the group. So here the relativeness is hence an element to comprehend the concept of social exclusion. There are many elements to understand the concept of social exclusion, but this is one of them. Furthermore, Burgess and Stern are of the view that developing the concept of social exclusion in the developing society appears to be practically not feasible because of the lack of well-formed welfare states, although a number of individuals or group may be treated as socially excluded one on the basis of the exclusion from social security measures or what we call it social welfare policy in whatever form these are available there. So let it be n number of people excluded from the mainstream of the society. Let there be many social welfare policies, but if the state is not well formed, then there is a problem of inclusion of this category of excluded people. So, to understand the situation of excluded people, there has to be a stronger state who tries to enumerate people with problems, people with margin, so that the inclusive measures reaches to them. That means the people who do not achieve certain minimum standards of facility related with health, food and nutrition, education, to mention few, could thus be considered as socially excluded ones. Now, in the considered opinion of the researchers in the field of social exclusion and inclusion, they talk about the coverage of state support for these excluded groups. Now, they are saying the coverage of the existing social security is very low. The state support for the infirm and the disabled people is negligible. The educational support is limited and does not usually extend beyond primary school. The state pensions cover a minority, and subsidized healthcare is spread very thinly and haphazardly. Now, these are the situations which are commonly found in the developing states, that the education is the state responsibility till the primary schooling, or the disabled people are not that much taken care of. There is a negligible help which is given by the state. In case of health facilities also, the beneficiaries are very small, and the benefits are very haphazardly spread across the state or across the kind of disease, and the things goes on multiplying. So many people in the developing societies are socially excluded. But the study of Burgess and Stun, for example, does not look into the root cause of social exclusion of certain groups and communities as such, from their active participation in certain social, cultural practices and tradition existing in the developing society. Now, if we talk about Burgess and Stern, there are other researchers also who are looking from one side of the cause of exclusion. They are not going into the deeper understanding, for example, the cultural understanding of exclusion or the social understanding of exclusion. This is possible when one look at the social and cultural practices and traditions which are existing in the society, for example, in the developing societies. So what do we do over here? Now, Roger, Gore, and Figueredo says that there is a need to modify the concept or the conceptual understanding of social exclusion in the Indian context. More precisely, they said that the conceptual issues in terms of relationship among social exclusion, basic needs of people, and the deprivation has to be dealt. They have synthesized the idea of relationship in social design to reduce social disadvantage of the people, also in respect to India. I would like to cite an example over here or work of some researchers who had been working across the theme or allied theme, which are supposed to be talking about inequalities or underdevelopment and so on. So here Apaswamy and others have examined some issues which are to some extent related to social exclusion. They are talking about the studies conducted in disaggregated location of urban and rural spheres, taking into gender into account, also taking age into account, income level, asset base. Religion is also one of the identity which they are using, and also the caste factor. Now, in fact, Apaswamy and others are, are concentrated on the dimensions of health, education, housing, water supply, sanitation, and social security. So they are working in these areas, in these spheres, in this dimension to understand the kind of margins or the kind of exclusion which are present in the society. He has also mentioned about the percentage of people with no access or inadequate access to each of these avenues. Let it be health, or let it be sanitation or housing or any other avenue, which are their human rights. So here the team says that social exclusion is to be defined in terms of exclusion from a few basic welfare rights. Now, when we look at the definition, it is a very simple definition from the perspective of Indian academics. It is nothing more than exclusion from the few basic welfare rights over here. Um, so, so understanding exclusion is very much right-based, which we can see over here. But the question remains how to overcome the social exclusion of the deprived people. I mentioned over here one author, Piercy and Smith, who provides a context by discussing policy response for social exclusion. They made a kind of policies which were very much in tune with the social conditions in which the social exclusion was happening. They were looking at the social fabrics of the society and the social processes present over there. Here the dimension of social exclusion are related to labor market, poverty, education and training, health, housing, access to services, political participation, poor access to urban resources, and so on and so forth. So this is also related with our Indian scenario to speak about. For policy formulation on recession of social exclusion, Abraham and others have drawn attention to the social psychology theory and research on social exclusion and inclusion. The rationale provided by them is to understand inclusion and exclusion at different levels by involving different types of processes provided in social psychology. As I mentioned, there are different themes which are running across this study. So here we can see the contribution of the field of psychology is also present over here. Going further, the author David Bryan makes a very strong statement and says that there is a need of social partner like state along with the intervention of community for overcoming social exclusion of the deprived people. So here, it is not only the responsibility of the state machinery, but here the involvement or the intervention of the society or the community is very, very important. Because the theme of social exclusion is very, very related to time and space. So according to the situation, the concepts also keep on changing. The characteristic of concept also keep on changing. So for that reason, it is the responsibility of the society also to understand this phenomena and support the state agency and also the other non-state actor to formulate policies on social inclusion. John Hill also made an attempt to formulate effective social inclusion policies. Now, these stalwarts are, heading some or the other centers which are related to social exclusion studies, and they are trying to look at different aspects of social exclusion. I remember when I was working in one of the center which was meant for social exclusion studies, that is Center for Studies in Social Exclusion and Inclusive Policy. That time when I made a contact for a collaborative research work to a director of a center, and when I showed my willingness to collaborate with their center, they informed me that they are working on housing and urban housing, as if uh, our work at that point of time in the late 2010, which was something very theme specific, or it was trying to get evolved in our Indian context, which was very much talking about labor relation, caste issue, tribe issues, unemployment, and so on. So at that point of time, we didn't reach to a very non-conventional aspect of studies, for example, housing. So that was a kind of a kick which I got, that but we have to look beyond the conventional areas of study to understand what is social exclusion. For example, nowadays there are many researchers which are going in different areas. For example, to understand the regional imbalance, to understand racism or ethnicity, there are different studies undertaken by many of this exclusive specific department or the traditional department. For example, doing study on the situation of northeastern states of India, or the studies which talks about ethnicity. These are the areas which are getting evolved in our Indian academia to understand exclusion of this group. Now, why these groups are becoming so very important? Because there is a phenomenon of migration, urbanization, which is happening. There is also a phenomenon of unemployment, regional underdevelopment, and so on and so forth. So to make this excluded group come into the mainstream, now again, the question of what is mainstream, that is again a debatable issue. But what the definition is talking about, participating in the functioning of the society, that is very important. The rights of an individual or group should not be curtailed. That is the issue. So in this context, I would like to further mention that it is not the state only, it is the society which has to look into the achievement of equality, equity, tolerance in the diverse situation of the society as the foundation for higher social construction. I would like to give an example over here of a of a of a of a of a, of a book which is by Professor T.K. Uman, which talks about social inclusion in independent India dimension approaches. Now, he is trying to look at different issues of social exclusion and how the social exclusion is so very important to be understood in our scenario over here. I end my lecture over here. Thank you so much. Welcome back. So we are going to look at the second part of the social exclusion concept. I would like to go back to yesterday's lecture where we were talking about definitions of social exclusion, the context of social exclusion, and the crisis in using this framework in the context of developing society. We also need to go into detail by looking at the recent literature review. Yesterday, I mentioned about one book which is talking about social inclusion in independent India, dimensions and approaches. This book is trying to look at the Indian scenario in a very holistic way, talking about regional imbalances, trying to look at the issues of northeastern states, issues of racial and ethnic diversities and their inclusion. As usual, talking about and considering issues of gender, tribes or Adivasis, caste, other backward classes, linguistic minorities, issues of inclusion, and so on and so forth. So I would like to deal with one particular issue so that you get a roughly good idea about what are the social institutions which are engaged in the social exclusion phenomena. What are the processes? What are the social processes included in the formulation and execution of social exclusion as such? For example, cooperation, integration, conflict, so on. We need to look at these issues also from a methodological standpoint, like what kind of methods are we using and what kind of theoretical perspective are we using. For example, it can be related to the specific definition, to formulate a theory, or to have an analytical framework, theoretical analytical framework, depending upon the usage of methods and methodology and the disciplinary approach. In that way, we can have a progression to look at what is the direction of social exclusion, what is the speed of social exclusion process, or what kind of changes are happening because of the social exclusion process. The phenomena of social exclusion, is it linear one? Is it cyclic one? If at all it is cyclic one, is it going in a clockwise direction or anti-clockwise direction? Is it starting from one particular point or from different point in different contexts? Is it starting from the particular point of inequality or deprivation and reaching to poverty and culminating into social exclusion, or vice versa? Because you are excluded, so you are poor, and that makes you unequal. Is it so or something else? So we need to look into the social structure of the society, social system of the society, and also we need to look into a few things which we have yesterday discussed. So here also I have one PowerPoint to share with you so that you get a good idea about what I'm trying to look at. Yeah, here is the PowerPoint for you. So this time I'm going to deal with the topic multiple sides of exclusion and limited inclusion. Now, what does it mean? And we have to see that what are the things we have covered till now. I would like to go back to yesterday's lecture and take 2 points from there. A definition, two definitions rather, which explains denial of equal opportunity imposed by certain groups of society, or it can be an individual, upon others, which leads to their inequality to participate in the basic social, cultural, political, economic, cultural functioning of the society, and so on. Now, the definition is also very contextual and very easy one, which says exclusion from few basic welfare rights is social exclusion. Now, these were the things which we covered yesterday. Going further, I would like to talk about the social system of India or social structure of Indian society and try to relate with basic welfare rights, rather human right in a holistic way that also includes basic or fundamental welfare rights of them. Here I'm going to take a very, common or a dominant framework to make you understand what is the Indian social structure as such. Make the screen larger for your convenience. Okay. So here I would like to start with, when we are talking about Indian social structure or of the society, we can say that the Indian social structure, or basically the Indian social system, or rather in India, Hindu social system, is rigidly stratified and divided into numerous castes, subcaste, and sub-subcaste, placed in a ritual or religious hierarchy with graded inequality. This hierarchized social stratification produces innumerable form and degree of inclusion and exclusion, inequality and discrimination for certain caste or subcaste or sub-subcaste in the caste system or in the Hindu social system. The uniqueness of discrimination practiced in the caste system can also be seen as based on the pursuits of occupation. This is the common view which is there, I would like to focus upon. I mean, one theory to understand the caste system. There are many theories to understand, but I'm using this occupational theory over here. In this context, there are occupations which are very clean or pure. Clean and pure occupation gives rise to enjoying higher or highest social status and prestiges. On the polar opposites, we see that there is lower status in the social order. Now, the association of a sizable section of the population with the later type of occupation, which is impure and unclean, which assigns lower status in the social order, results into keeping physical and social distance with and practice of untouchability. Now, these are the features of Indian social system, Indian social structure. Thus, these sections of population, which constitutes around 19% of today's India's population, are officially categorized as scheduled castes, or they themselves call as Dalits in the caste hierarchy. Now, it is evident that these people's polluting and untouchable presence allowed them to enter the shared social and religious life only at the margins. Now, here there is a thing which we can understand, how there is a kind of a mechanism to create a hierarchy, to give people their statuses and to keep some of them at the margin, which later on creates an exclusion, like crossing the margin means an excluded phenomenon. Now, before going into much detail, I would like to recall the definition which we have taken. The second definition talks about exclusion from basic welfare rights. Now, uh, sorry, there's some problem over here. I would like to go back to the PowerPoint and share you. Sorry, I couldn't share you this. Yeah. So yeah, this were the points which I was discussing. I was not able to display this slide. So have a look at this. Yeah. So when I'm talking about the exclusion from the basic welfare rights, in large, I would like to talk about what are the human rights. Now, human rights here are those fundamental and inalienable rights that are essential for life as human being. Human rights are something that are everyone equally has by virtue of their very humanity, and that also by virtue of their being grounded in our appeal to our human nature. But as I told you, there has been a deliberate negligence of social, cultural, political, civil, economic rights, which are through religious sanctions, example, Dharma Shastras, sanctions of law books, or Manusmriti for the scheduled caste people or the Dalit people, as mentioned in Romila Thapar's book of 1985. In this regard, range of untouchability related to physical touch, access to water, food, housing, employment, health, and polity is seen. Now, these spheres are also included in the few basic welfare rights like having potable water or shelter or livelihood. These are basic few welfare rights. Similarly, the violation of civil rights or basic welfare rights for them in public places, especially in the case of temple entry, is seen in various parts of the country. Now, I'm taking exclusively this example of temple entry because it is related with religion, it is related with your employment, it is related with your existence, it is related with your dignity, and so on and so forth. So I've just taken this as an example. And we could see, a violation of the rights of Dalit people across the country in recent times also. And Ghanshyam Shah's book has made a quite larger survey which talks about caste-based discrimination which are faced by the people. I'll go further and try to make you understand more by giving a kind of a understanding, theoretical understanding, and analytical understanding regarding what it is when we look at it from a disciplinary approach. For example, as I'm a sociologist, I would like to bring in those things to contextualize that why are we looking into the issue of social institutions or social processes and trying to measure the impact of social exclusion or the change which is happening in the society. What kind of change, cyclic or linear change? Will that social exclusion happen again in a cyclic manner, or it's going to be linear one, which is going to weather away after some kind of inclusive policy, and so on and so forth. So here I'm trying to make a theoretical analytical framework for your better understanding. So as I mentioned, the caste system is regulated by Hindu religious institutions based on purity and pollution. As we have seen, many social reformers, intellectual people working for the eradication of social evil coming from the institution of caste. For example, B.R. Ambedkar is there, Mahatma Gandhi is there, and for sociology, we have Liu Dumo, who is talking about purity and pollution in his book Homo Hierarchus. These religious regulations directs social action and interaction towards each individual in society, like what Max Weber is talking about, social action, that how religion is trying to regulate the social actions and interaction towards every individual in the society. Further, which culminates into unequal hierarchical relation in the society. Thus, we see that the social institution of religion is engaged in anti-capacity building of individual, because the fullest capacity of the individual is also never coming out. So there is a need to have a formal arrangement to replace the informal arrangement, which has been from the longer time for capacity building with the help of state machinery. Why it is so? Why we need to have a state machinery? It is in a powerful state that the decisions are taken quickly and implemented effectively, what Rajni Kothari and Gutman were talking about. So for perfect and just society, there is a need of not only social institutions like family, religion, economy, polity, education, but also that of state. Now, state is becoming very important factor for making the society more inclusive one. Before that, there were many informal arrangements for social inclusion, but here we want to add an actor, which is a state over here. Now, why so further? But John Rawls, who talks about and who gives us caution that conflict, like social process, arises from the unequal distributive share due to the interference of social institutions. According to Tuman, those having power exploit the rest in the competition for resources to be shared, eventually get monopolized resources and power. Now, this monopolistic control on resources creates incapability in people. This was a kind of work which was, done by Amartya Sen in the early 90s, talking about incapabilities and resources. This results, for example, if you see in case of scheduled caste community or scheduled tribe community, specifically when I'm talking about caste over here, this results into violation of a violation of human rights of them in social, cultural, political, civil, religious, and especially in the religious sphere, which is being reported in the National Commission for Scheduled Caste and Scheduled Tribe. Since long time, even in the recent time, in the recent report, you can see it. Thus, there is a need for what the people say, that what the scheduled caste people feel, that there is a need of getting liberated from the religiously imposed and sanctioned degradation. This liberation means for them conversion of religion with an explicit rejection of the present religion and its psychological conditioning and embracing a new religion. Now, here, the new religion, in the sense it can be any religion, it is seen that the change of religion has liberated them from the stigma of untouchability, thus enhancing their confidence to a great measure. Um, um, for example, if they get converted into Christianity or Islam or Sikhism or Buddhism, whatever faith they want to choose in that way. Um, um, they have used conversion as a resistance as well as self-redefining strategy, which release their creative energy, increase self-confidence, and a new sense of human dignity. Conversion includes a reformulation of social relationship in which they are into, like the new religion and also the past religion, cultural meanings, personal experiences in terms of their ideas of the adopted religions. Now, this process is not that very simple, uh, uh, moving from one religion to another religion. They have to understand the new religion. They have to, adopt those new religious practices, understand the cultural meanings, build up a social relationship. And in that, the whole social fabric of yesterday is also present over there. That gives rise to a process as going through a series of stages. Now, what are the stages over here? It includes context, crisis, quests, encounters, interactions, commitments, and also consequences. Now, these many things are there to be understood as such. Now, the situation is that when we look into so many things over here, and they want to move out of one situation and go into another by changing the religion, but they are still into the institution of religion, either this or either that. They are they are always in the institution of economy, of earning, gaining daily wages, earning income. They are also in the institution of caste, and everything is intact, but the change of religion is happening. Now, when we look at so many exclusionary practices happening in the life of this people, now, what are the processes of social inclusion here? When we talk about that, we need to look into the inclusive policy. For example, when we talk about having a very stronger state for an effective implementation, adoption and implementation of the policies. Now let's see what it is. Now the Constitution legally abolished the practice of untouchability and the discrimination of Dalits arising out of untouchability under Article 17. Article 21, right to life, is also there. Article 15 talks about right to religion and guarantee against discrimination related to it. Article 25 confers right to establish and manage religious affairs. There are different acts like Protection of Civil Rights Act, ECR 1976, and the Scheduled Caste and Scheduled Tribe Prevention of Atrocity Act 1989. There are national human rights commissions and state human rights commissions, and many other, you can see, developmental policies are also there. For example, housing policy is there. You have a policy of Manrega for getting employment, involvement of women also is there from this background. We have integrated development program which take care of not only education but also health and food and nutrition, which becomes an inclusive development where these three factors are there. Employment is there, education is there, food and nutrition is there, which is coming, and health is there, which is coming from the PDS system, and so on and so forth, with the involvement of grassroots level managerial staff, which is well versed with the cultural practices, with the social practices, and also the people around in the society. So here the role of the state is very specific. There is a kind of policies are also in place. So now, what is the situation? Why they want to come out of the one particular kind of religious practices and go to new? Because they felt that they want to get liberated, and they in the new situation they will be having creative energy. They will have a self-confidence and a new sense of identity, and so on and so forth. So here I would like to give an example over here. But before that, I would like to mention a few things over here. That the Constitution of India is one of the most right-based constitution in the world. The Constitution captures the essence of human rights in its preamble, in its sections on fundamental rights and directive principle of state policy. So these many things are there, but how the movements are happening over there in the society. Now, I have chosen a topic deliberately, which is going to shed light on the institution of religion, institution of caste, institution of economy, institution of polity, cultural practices, and so on and so forth, which will help you to understand where the social exclusionary practices, processes, and what kind of inclusive measures were taking place in their life with the help of the constitutional measures, the acts, and different policies. Let's have a look over here. So yeah, as there are cases of practice of untouchability and violation of Dalit human rights all over the country. The case of Keratoconus village of Kendrapada district in Orissa is one of them. Now, this case or this agitation is spanning over a few years. Like for example, from 2005 to 2006, we can see the agitation happening over there. Now, what was the agitation? We just have to go into the ethnography of the place over there. The demography of the Keratoconus village shows a total population of 1400, comprising 400 Dalit community households. Population. Traditionally, they were allowed to enter Lord Jagannath temple. They were not allowed to enter Lord Jagannath temple due to purity and pollution practices. They were allowed to see God through 9 holes of the temple. There was a wall which was having 9 holes, and through that, the people used to see the deities. The Dalit people used to see the deity and get the blessing. Many times, Dalits try to break the tradition of exclusion from temple entry, but they were barred by the upper caste of the village. On 14th November 2005, 4 Dalit women exercised their right to enter temple and worship the god, but were consequently beaten up by the guardian of purity and pollution, that is the upper caste people of the village. After a few months, like on 6th December 2006, around 2000 Dalit took a rally to the district collectorate for seeking protection for temple entry for them. But instead of providing protection for Dalits, the police questioned them that why you want to enter this temple particularly, and discourage them. On the very next day, that is 7th December 2006, Dalits again tried to exercise their constitutional right to enter the temple. Now, what happened after this? When I was talking about, contestations and crisis and quest and encounters, in this sense, you have to look this whole case. So now, what was the encounter over here? Following this incident, Caste Hindu filed a court case against Dalits. A division bench of Orissa High Court ruled that all Hindus had the right to enter any temple irrespective of caste. Now, mark this judgment now, what the High Court is saying, that Hindus had the right to enter any temple irrespective of caste. Now, you have to keep this statement in mind when we progress this case. The court ordered the district administration to direct the caste Hindu to not to prevent Dalits from worshipping in the temple. In the wake of court rulings in the favor of, in their favor, 200 Dalits barged into the temple to perform religious rituals. Now they got the right and they went into the temple and they wanted to perform worships. 2 platoons of policemen were deployed for the security of the Dalits to enter the temple. But the upper caste people and the prince and the temple priest furiously opposed the move of the court and Dalits by saying that the entry of Dalits people is against the custom of the temple, where no person of Dalit origin had stepped in so far. Temple priest expressed anguishedly that he and other priests will not perform rituals if they are allowed into the temple. The temple's chief priest declared that we stop all the rituals that have been regularly performed from decades after they entered the temple premises. Dalit have besmirched the religious traditions and have polluted the temple. We need to perform Mahasnana, a bath ritual of the deity for purification. Till then, temple will be closed down. Now, this was the statement which was coming from the temple's chief, that there is a pollution of the temple because of their entry and we need to purify. Till that it is closed. The temple was opened later, only after purification rituals were performed, were resumed. When the king of the erstwhile Kanika kingdom and the interim trustee of the temple visited the site and held discussion with the caste Hindu, he appealed Dalits to get in return from the Puri Jagannath temple that Dalits are Hindus, then only they will be allowed to enter the temple, as narrated by a respondent when I was in the field trip, when I was doing the field work. This came also in the newspaper. There was a wide newspaper coverage in 2006 regarding that. You can find it on internet. Now, when I was saying you have to look into the verdict which the Orissa High Court gave, that all Hindus had the right to enter any temple irrespective of caste, that was here by challenged by the people, by the trustee, saying that this has to be gotten return from the Jagannath temple by the Dalits, saying that they are Hindus and they will be allowed to enter, then only they will be allowed to enter into the temple. Okay. Further, despite of court ruling that opposition from temple entry is illegal, then also there were 3 upper caste leaders who opposed it. So on 8 December 2006, they were charged under Section 3 of the Scheduled Caste and Scheduled Tribe Prevention of Atrocity Act for illegally instigating people to oppose the entry of Dalit into the temple, and police had to issue arrest warrants against them. Now the situation is not so clear that arrests were happened or not. That was something very official and tricky issue. On the other hand, at the community level, also all the upper caste people protested the entry of Dalits into Lord Jagannath temple in the defense of an aged old caste system and religious practices. They said, this is an aged old practice and a religious practice, an aged old caste practice, that Dalits were not allowed into the temple. So, whole community came together and protested for this kind of move of Dalits. So talks were held to bring about a rapprochement between the two sides, the caste Hindus and Dalits. It was decided that a wall inside the main boundary temple with 9 holes through which Dalits were traditionally allowed to view the deity would be demolished, and an open corridor will be provided for both upper caste people and Dalits to worship. Now there used to be one wall with 9 holes through which these people were looking, praying and worshipping to the Lord Jagannatha. Now with the verdict, with the new happening, they thought of demolishing that wall. But what happened later on? Let's see now. I mean, when we are talking about exclusion, it's not that simple. Now, what is the complex situation over here? It was also announced that only priests would be allowed to perform rituals and enter the sanctum of Lord Jagannath temple. But later on, fraudulently, a side iron grill gate with 64 holes were exclusively meant for Dalits to view the deities. Now, instead of 9 holes, there were 64 holes through which they were allowed to worship. They repeated the same exclusionary policy to prevent entry of Dalits in the temple. Dalits were restricted to worship and do a proper offering to God. They were allowed to offer only coconut instead of banana or cooked food, like that of caste Hindus. So there were so many kind of limitations and restrictions for them to come to the temple and do a kind of offering which they want to. So these were the kind of tactics which were taking place. It was observed that majority of the Dalits in the village are landless cultivators or delivators. Since the day Dalits entered the temple, they were spending sleepless nights due to fear. The upper caste villagers were venting their anger against Dalits, and many of them turned revengeful. Consequently, many landowners had stopped giving work to them. This case reveals that how right to religion, right to livelihood, right to life is violated of Dalits in rural setting. So Dalits were unhappy over the local administration's move of not protecting them. They outburst their anger, saying it is an insult to the entire Dalit community and violation of court's order. In response to the atrocious caste system of Hinduism, Dalits took the drastic step to leave Hinduism and convert themselves to Buddhism. They express that we do not want to give a feeling that they are challenging them, that is the upper caste Hindus. We would like to establish brotherhood in true sense. One of the Dalit leader confessed that we are not superseding upper caste people, rather we are only trying to be equal. Now here again, trying to remove the inequality by changing religion and trying to be equal. Now this is the kind of their understanding that moving from one location which creates inequality, another location might provide them with a kind of equal basis. That was the trust. Now, from where the idea is coming, that has to be taken into account, because the state which I'm talking about, Orissa, where we could see there wasn't any renaissance happening at the time. Even colonial impact also didn't happen. The neighboring state of West Bengal had, seen the period of Renaissance, and other states of India, for example, southern states, including Punjab and UP also this one. But the situation of this state is something very different. So in that context, we need to see in a broader way, how the idea of equality is coming to them, and this period of time, not in mid 50s, but in mid 2000, mid 2005 6. It is said that Dr. Ambedkar led Dalits to accept Buddhism as it is both beneficial and moral. Buddhism fits the needs of the new society and provides a solution to its dilemma. It projects the sorrow of exploitation. Buddhism has clear idea about ideal society, which they visualize as an open, egalitarian, and mobile one. Buddhism denies the ritual birth-based ascription for setting it against all notion of purity and pollution, magic-centered life fostered by the ideology such as Brahmanism of Buddhism. Now, this is mentioned in the work of Webster's of 1999. So now here comes the idea of equality through a leader who was working for the equality of the country, and after the conversion of people from Hinduism to Buddhism in mid 1950s. Now it is happening over here. Now let's say further, like what kind of steps they took to get away from the exclusion and try to include in the new processes in a new way. Now, what are the things and what kind of exclusionary practices were again coming in their way that we need to understand over here. So, as per Orissa Freedom of Religion Act 1967, an affidavit was filed against the district collectorate by at least 1,000 Dalit to was filed before the district collectorate by at least 1,000 Dalits to embrace Buddhism on 3rd January 2007. So it was like, this many people went to the district collectorate to file their interest to, convert to a new religion. In the process of religious conversion, they were interrupted by saying that 1 month before permission was needed for conversion, that was not taken. Rather, it was taken 3 months before. They were also not allowed to erect tents and use loudspeaker for the ceremony of conversion on the ground that they were not, the permission was not taken prior when it was taken formally from the court. People were coming from the near vicinity, nearby village for the process of conversion, taking both of new religion. So 17 vehicles of the Dalits coming from the different location for the conversion process were allowed in the name of offering village feast by the local politician so as to stop them from reaching the conversion ceremony. The place of erecting Dr. Ambedkar's statue was encroached overnight by the upper caste people for building village goddesses temple. But still, on 14 April 2007, the day of Ambedkar's birth anniversary, a Buddhist monk from Delhi converted Dalits and also tribal people to Buddhism and laid the foundation stone for the Buddhist temple or pagoda and Dr. Ambedkar's statue at Aul village in nearby the Keratoconus village in Kendrapada district. Now, consequently, they were discriminated practice in the form of denying drinking water, denying work, livelihood, educational facility, public amenities, and also commensal relationship for Dalits were disturbed. Now, what happened to the new Buddhist over there? When we're talking about interactions, commitment, and consequences, let's take a stock about these things also. The new Buddhists in the village were scared of their lives from the unexpected consequences of conversion. These incidents certainly relates to both caste prejudices and untouchability in social, cultural, political, and economic sphere regarding land, wages, indebtedness, bondage, poverty, and so on, practiced by caste Hindu land owning classes. In this case, the High Court had also summoned the district collector to report the situation of the village, temple, and the Dalit community. But it was found that police is not doing fieldwork for reporting the situation to the higher authority about the safeguard of the neo-Buddhist over here. It is observed that police abstain from this matter to be decided by the upper caste oppressors and the oppressed Dalits. Now see what kind of stand they are taking. The agitated Dalits decided to file a case against the district collector who was very uncooperative in spite of High Court summon. The district collector was more concerned about Puri constitution than the Indian constitution. Like he asked to get in return, they are Hindus, then only they will be allowed to enter the temple. For that reason, they are saying, the district collector was non-cooperative and for other reason, for not protecting them. This means he was openly discriminating Dalits and favoring upper caste people. In this case study, it is seen that state machinery like police did not fulfill their duties to protect and promote right to religion, right to human rights or Dalit human rights. Thus, the case study shows contest and crisis in religious conversion and Dalits' quest and encounter in the new religion. So when we change the religious context, or change the religion, but still you are in the social processes, you are still in the same society, you have to have your everydayness for being in the society as an individual, as a group, then it becomes something kind of a troublesome. Here it shows that the personal as well as the public troubles of Dalit that have spilled from private sphere over to the public domain governed by persons, individuals, community, and state. This simply means that the rights of Dalits for religion is at stake, creating questions of their origin, self-respect, unequal treatment for liberty of expression and practice, and also fraternal relationship irrespective of their faith and belief in any religious community, region, culture, etc. Incidentally, we can say their rights related to right to livelihood, shelter, security, which are few basic welfare rights, has been narrowed down by the state action due to politics. Now, when we are saying that we need to have a stronger state for adopting and implementing different inclusive policy, but here becomes something very, very different. Now the situation is here, which needs to be looked in different manner. Few observations which I could make, because here it's very difficult to summarize everything because it is an interdisciplinary thing. It is up to the individual researcher to think about. There is a need to remove lengthy processes and painful delay in the disposal of cases coming under this specific act for providing Dalits human right, or otherwise it will have a very little impact due to less conviction rate of the culprit of untouchability or traditional as well as the traditional force. So the victim has to regain and feel that they are not demoralized and they should have faith in judiciary. there should be also a linkage between Directorate of Civil Right Enforcement and the police officers at different level, village level and taluka level, for preparing, fact-finding details for function, uh, uh, for functional relevance and so on and so forth. Uh, exactly that why we need to talk about these few basic welfare rights or human rights, because we are talking about the process of social exclusion and how to include it. So this becomes very important, that we need to create an awareness in different forms of platforms, like different courses where we can think of why this human right policy came into existence, and what is the philosophy behind that. So these are the few things which I wanted to share in the form of PowerPoint over here. I would like to mention a few things over here, which is very necessary, that we have taken into account the elements of definition of social exclusion, which talks about denial of equal opportunity, and also exclusion from few basic rights. We have also looked into the theoretical analytical perspective, which becomes disciplinary specific. We can have a different model. That's why I'm using the word over here, that it has to be an analytical one. Thirdly, I gave an example of a very concrete and a traditional example, which gave you an understanding about which are the social institutions which are part and parcel of the exclusion process. What are the social processes involved over here? Is there any cooperation happening, or only the conflict situation is there, and so on and so forth. Furthermore, uh, it is up to the each and every researchers to apply the methodology or the method. Let it be quantitative one, let it be qualitative one. The qualitative one, like understanding the narratives, taking autobiography to understand the locations or sites of exclusion. What I'm talking about, the multiple site, what were the limitations of getting included in society, those also can be understood. At the same time, for making a wider analysis to look into the direction or the space of social exclusion as such, we can also think of having a quantitative type of study, which will look into what is the level or degree of exclusion, or what are the what is the kind of change which this kind of exclusionary practices are making, or what kind of inclusionary policies are needed, and what kind of important equality basis changes will be taking place. That has to be taken into account. So it's not a matter of only looking at a certain case and talking about the exclusion which are happening over there, but here, as I taken the institution of caste, the institution of religion, the talk of education of their children, how the loss of employment is happening over there, how they are talking about dignity, how they are talking about regaining their identities, how they are talking about the fraternity. All those things are very important to make the process of social inclusion possible. So what is the role of the state, and how far the implementation process is happening, and where the implementation process is happening? Always we are implementing not in vacuum. As I told you, there is a relationality. The implementation is happening in the society. There are different society forces are there present, which will always try to regain their power. What Foucault is talking about, what Derrida is talking about, construction and reconstruction and deconstruction. Okay, so in that way we have to understand, and we have to formulate and reformulate, shape and reshape the issue of social inclusion. So that's why I was talking about how there is a limitation in the inclusionary process and how there is a multiplicity in the process of exclusion. So I would like to thank all the participants over here for listening to this lecture, both the lecture and once again, I would like to thank the director of the HRDC Center and the course coordinators for inviting me and sharing my opinion regarding the concept again, which is very, very important and very contemporary also to the participant. So here I would like to stop my lecture over here, and thank you so much. Thank you.